President Trump comes back yesterday and announces 10% for everybody. What the heck? Except for China. 145% tariff. And the stock market nosedived again. And now it's kind of down, but not out as I read it, but it may have changed since I've been waiting for this Zoom call. So, hi, and welcome to the Silicon Insider podcast. Hey, Scott.
Hey, Mike.
Anything exciting going on?
Everything in Silicon Valley is very smooth here. No one's freaking out or
Have you been live on air every day this week with everything that's going on?
yeah, it's been a couple weeks now, and not just on air, but everywhere you go, it's one of these times where everybody is kind of talking about the same thing. It is the topic of conversation just between tariffs and the stock market, and one leading to the other. And it's obviously got the attention of a lot of people around here because so many people, live and die by their stock options and investments.
Right. And not only that, but I mean, even a couple months ago, I was talking to a guy at a startup, and he was saying we may have to move to, they have most of their manufacturing in China because that's the cheapest way to start. And they said, if the tariffs come through, we're probably going to have to go to India or Vietnam or Mexico or somewhere. And well, obviously, he's thinking about it right now because, we'll get into it. I don't even know how to approach this week. Everything we're about to talk about could be upside down or gone by the time this airs. I mean, hell, it might even be gone or changed before we finish this recording. So we'll leave that as a caveat and get into it. Okay, tariffs. Obviously, we got to start with that. Last week, the White House dropped the bomb on all the tariffs that are going to be placed on 100 plus nations. And they varied from, 10% up to Canada and Mexico with 25%, and Europe, the EU with something close to that, and then ultimately China. Well, and the stock market tanked, as stock markets tend to do when chaos erupts and no one knows exactly what's going on. This week, the president suddenly announced a 90-day moratorium, in a sense. He said the claim is from the Secretary of Treasury that more than 70 nations have contacted the administration wanting to talk. And as of today, I think 15 countries have now offered trade deals. So things are starting to settle out. And then Trump, faced with what I understand was the possibility of the bond market collapsing over this, and a depression, an actual honest to God depression, not just a slowdown of the economy, backed off, reduced all the tariffs to 10%, except for China. And the stock market came roaring back. It had dropped like 11% total, and then came roaring back on
Wednesday,
and 3,000 points, which is almost a market record, I believe, on the belief that, it's all getting settled out. President Trump comes back yesterday and announces 10% for everybody. What the heck? Except for China. 145% tariff. And the stock market nosedived again. And now it's kind of down, but not out as I read it, but it may have changed since I've been waiting for this Zoom call. So, I mean, what's the market at right now? What did it close at?
Well, right. So as you and I talk, it is Thursday night. So the market is long closed, and it did have another 1,000-point drop on Thursday. By the time anyone's listening to this, it will be later, and who knows. But 39.5 is about where it is, 39.6 for the Dow. NASDAQ was down 737 points to 16,387. These are really substantial losses now over the last 5 trading days, even counting the biggest one-day point gain for the Dow and NASDAQ in history. And it just shows the volatility that people have when they don't know what's coming or going when it comes to their money.
Well, I think we all have that right now. It's like the whole point is to guard your money, your wealth, and protect it, invest it properly, and also plan for the future, like groceries and buying cars and all that. And we have every day it seems to swing back and forth between good and bad. We have no idea what's in the president's mind. Is he playing the art of the deal? And was all this to actually create reciprocal tariffs, or was it designed at just a few countries and he decided to just turn over the card table and start all over again and say everybody even, which is what Elon seems to be saying. We shouldn't have any tariffs, but if anything, we should all be equal. Or was all this originally and still is about China?
I mean, there will be classes, I'm sure, in future business schools taught about the last couple of weeks, and they will still have to speculate as to what Trump is really doing here. But right, I mean, the formula for choosing what tariffs to put on other countries didn't make sense in terms of tariffs that they had put on us.
Yeah.
There were some trade imbalance numbers that somehow went in there, and then some sort of formula that, I don't know, looked Greek. I mean, it is a question mark, and that's the problem. It's not just that he's putting tariffs that are often inflationary on these countries that we have trade agreements with. It's also that the uncertainty, they're here, they're gone, they're definitely here, absolutely 100% here, and then 12 hours later they're gone, and then they're increased. I just can't imagine, if you are thinking about putting money in or taking money out of the market, you'd have any clarity as to what's coming up. Those of us who do not buy and sell individual stocks just kind of have to sit back and watch it all happen. But if you're someone who's counting on, say, your stock options or an account to buy a house or buy a car, and all of a sudden you're seeing all this chaos, you've got to be thinking, I don't know what I'm going to do next.
Well, think about a purchasing officer for NVIDIA or AMD or one of these companies. You're buying chips, or you're buying components of chips, or you're buying something related to semiconductors. When do you buy? Do you hold right now and say, we'll make our big purchase next month? After the big stock jumped, you go, we're back. Let's order. And you get killed the next day. I mean, this must be creating absolute paralysis in most of the companies of Silicon Valley.
Well, companies and even individuals, because you do tend to just sort of look at it with your jaw on the floor and wonder what's going on next. But I haven't seen companies, I'm not privy to the buying and selling and CapEx budgets of companies day by day, but we have seen people who were considering a car purchase over the next 6 months go to the dealer right now and say, let me do this before the price goes up.
Yeah.
We just did a story.
$10,000 a car.
Right. We just did a story with someone on their way to the Apple store. She was going to buy an iPhone maybe in the next few months, but whoa, if I do it now, maybe I miss a price hike. And that sort of thing is going through people's minds. At the same time, they're probably thinking, maybe I should put off that major purchase, because who knows, our economy, according to JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs, may go into recession soon. And then, people buy less.
Well, yeah. And not only that, but there's signs and symptoms of potential deflationary effects. And in that case, my mom used to tell me about how she used to go to see a movie and a short film and buy a candy bar, all for a nickel in 1931. Okay. So, if you want to buy that $30,000 car, it's either going to be 40,000 or it might be 5,000. like the way cars cost when I was a kid. I mean, it's a really tricky situation right now, and you almost can't even hold because you may lose everything that way. I mean, it's no wonder everybody's talking about it. And I think we're going to be talking about it for the next 90 days. And even then, if that all gets settled out and most of these countries agree to 10%, which many of them would be smart to do since, well, like Canada, aluminum from Canada is 140% tariff, and agriculture from Canada is like 150% tariff. If we say, well, we're only going to charge you 10%, deal. I mean, it's a good deal for places like Canada and parts of the EU. And, if Trump gets we'll buy, we won't have any trade barriers to Fords, and it will lower the ones on BMWs. Win. Malawi doesn't have any tariffs against us, but we're probably going to hit them with 10%. They lose. China. China's the interesting one because here you've got a country that believes it's the equal in economic power to the United States. And it has a totalitarian regime. I mean, it's a communist run country, but it's really a one guy run country. And he can just cross his arms and say no. I mean, he shut that whole country down with COVID, for months and months. They were welding people into their apartments in some cases. And there was no revolution. There was no rioting in the streets. It seems to me that the Chinese economy is awfully resilient to outside pressures. And, Xi's, in theory, he's in a race, whether, he can win this thing or civil war. But I don't think he thinks there's a danger of internal strife against this. The one thing he doesn't have is a strong economy right now. I mean, that economy is hurting. But if he says we go for it, who's going to stop him? And that could put us into months and months of a trade war and with no end in sight. And that may be the most scary part of all of this.
Right. The Trump administration is saying, well, we'll bring manufacturing back to the United States and we'll, have people on assembly lines putting screws into iPhones. And, America hasn't done that in a very long time. And even if we decide that that's our way, it's going to take years to get that going if we even want to. And so there's no short-term solution for that problem. And that's why, so many people think the future is cloudy because the end games that the Trump administration's people are talking about are just not going to happen, at least not for the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, you get the image, at least in my mind, of two guys getting ready for a fight. And they're both taking off their jackets and they're taking off their shirts. This is going to be a bare knuckler. And Trump is saying, fine, you got another 90 days, world, to get it all straightened out. And he's been prepping for this for several years. He's been prepping, actually, from what I understand, he's been prepping for this since the last Trump administration. And so you got two fighters who really think that they're the stronger of the two, and they're going to duke it out. And I think it's going to be ugly. If one doesn't get knocked out immediately, it's going to go on for a long time.
Well, and America's just not built for it. Our stock market's not built for it. Our economy is not built for it. We're built for trade with global partners. And this slows that down. And if it slows it down enough, what follows.
Yeah, well, we got this wild ass story. I don't know if you read, I'm sure you read it, that Apple loaded up a couple cargo planes with 6 tons of iPhones from India and just flew them back here. They're getting ready to rumble too. At least they're battening down. I don't know how long 6 tons of iPhones last, but I don't think it's that long.
I don't know. And that's felt apocryphal to read that story, but it's it's like the person that we saw, in the story who was going to the mall several months ahead of time to buy her new iPhone because she's worried about the pricing going up.
Right. So have you validated that story? Is it true that they
No,
lowered?
I have no idea if it's true. I haven't seen it other than on social media, and I don't know if it's true.
I don't think Cook's going to say if it is or not, too.
I don't know if it would even break any laws if you fly in phones ahead of a shipping deadline. I don't even know, honestly.
Yeah.
But it can't last forever, obviously.
Right. It's interesting. We began to try to attract companies like uh, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, TMSC, a couple years ago, as for fear of Taiwan getting invaded. But it may turn out to be very prescient if these fabs come online, because the one thing we can do better than the Chinese is the really, really high-end semiconductors. They really have trouble down in those low nanometers. And so they're building like uh, well, smartphones and doorbells and all of that kind of stuff. That's their bread and butter. And we're building a lot of AI stuff. And that might be our advantage in the long run, that they just can't keep up with the super stuff. And they fall behind economically, militarily, that sort of thing. We'll see. I mean, now we're talking about lining up advantages on either side and try to figure out, who's got the edge. Um, I guess we won't really, well, I should mention Trump took tariffs up on China to 125, and then he took it up again to 145, saying you're not being respectful. Uh, my buddy Xi is not being respectful. We're getting weird, contradictory comments on that too. Um, let's take a bet, you and me. $10. Who blinks?
She doesn't blink. Trump may have already blinked once on Wednesday of
Yeah,
this last week when he said, we'll put a 90-day pause on, and he started talking about the bond market, which
yeah.
was, that's something in the weeds to get into, but it was concerning, not to
I guess
mention a falling
Peter
stock market.
Navarro, one of those guys, said you're going to crash the bond market like within 24 hours if you don't do something quickly, and he
Right.
obviously did.
So is that blinking? Do we already end the bet?
I guess it is. Uh, but China, one of the problems that Xi has is they've allowed a little bit too much democracy and free speech into China. If you go on those chat pages, in Chinese platforms, there's some pretty strong words being said against the government and against communism. Is that enough? I don't know. I mean, the government there has been pretty good at arresting and crushing dissidents, but it seems to be getting louder and louder, partly because, you look at those videos of downtown Hong Kong and Beijing, and where all the stores are all empty and boarded up, and people are asking, where is everybody? And some are pointing out that, well, the government's lied about the population statistics. There's not 1.2 million. There's like 675 million. Is that true or not? Their military looks fairly incompetent. It's more about parades. It's kind of like North Korea. It's more about parades than an actual action. Are they going to take this moment to invade Taiwan? What are they going to do? I mean, so take your pick, Scott. Which one? Throw
I
a
don't
dart.
know. I mean, I think
Throw a dart against the board.
right. The big question, the big problem is that we don't have any visibility going forward. We don't know what China is going to do. We don't know what our economy is going to do. We don't know what the White House is going to do. And
Right.
so when people say, gosh, it wasn't that long ago we had a strong economy. What is our stock market doing, dropping 20%? Well, that's what happens when there's that much uncertainty in our economy and in our future. And that's what this whole thing has brought, is a lot of people wondering what happens next. And that's why they're pulling their money out. They are even seeing changes overnight. when the
Yeah.
markets are closed. They're seeing changes over the weekend when they're supposed to be just hanging
Yeah,
out.
there's a lot of sleepy day traders out there right now. They're staying up 72 hours to see what's going on. Um, it seems to me the beneficiaries of all this are uh, Vietnam, India. They got the 10% deal now, and yet most of these American companies, at least, and a lot of European companies, manufacturers that have been in China, have begun to shift their operations to those countries. Uh, if China it doesn't get aggressive with them, they're in pretty good shape through all this because somebody's got to make the world's smartphones and personal computers and laptops and
Right.
all that.
Right, but isn't the concern that China is cutting deals with European countries now, and
Well, it's trying.
and those European countries are therefore leaving us out of the deals? And
Yeah.
so I don't know. It's hard to pick a winner, but if you look at our stock market, you've got a lot of losing companies, a lot of losing investors right now.
Yeah, unfortunately for China, it hasn't burnished its reputation with the rest of the world with the Silk Road Initiative. There's an awful lot of countries that have bailed out of that, unfinished projects, and especially in Africa, just rampant racism that the African people are treated like slaves. They didn't expect that. They thought this was going to be a bonus for them, and it hasn't quite turned true. So it'll be interesting to see. It's kind of a test how far China's come from being invisible, the quiet hidden nation, to being a major player on the world, a welcome player on the world scene, as opposed to being just a major player. It's a test of a lot of things, it seems to me. It seems as if the whole world economic order is being revised. And we don't know what it even looks like on the far side.
Very possible. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Next up, I don't have a lot of stuff. Let's talk about the stock market for a minute. How we keep hearing from the White House that the new emphasis is Main Street, not Wall Street. That we're not going to really worry about the stock market. We're going to take care of jobs and industrialization and filling up factories again and that sort of thing. Can that really happen? Can you really ignore the stock market with its ups and downs, or is it just so volatile that worrying about it doesn't help?
Well, worrying about it never helps. And no, I don't think you can ignore the stock market. You can't ignore the bond market. I think that's why we had the 90-day pause.
Yeah.
Ultimately, Donald Trump sort of made his bet on this. He used the Dow as a sort of a barometer of his performance. And so a lot of people went along with that. And those who voted for him are now saying, wait a minute, that was kind of our barometer of why we put you back in office. And it's down 20% because of these things that we don't quite understand and because of a future we can't quite picture yet. And so I think the market is speaking for a lot of people, and a lot of people are listening to it and getting very worried.
Okay. Inflation is down, interestingly. Now, I hear 2 points of view on that. One of them is because we're starting to save money, because we're reducing regulations, we're opening up, oil exploration, all of that. That's driving down inflation. The other point of view, though, is people can't afford anything right now, so they're not buying. And so the stores are still empty, or nearly empty, and no one's going to splurge on, cars or jewelry or anything else until we know what's going on, until the economy gets better. Which side do you go on, or both of them?
Well, I think it's just too early. I think the inflation numbers we got were from earlier, pre-tariff. And, we've seen inflation go down for some time now, and that's good news. Tariffs are often inflationary, but the tariffs haven't really kicked in yet, right? I mean,
Yeah.
We haven't yet seen the auto lots or even the mattress stores charging tariffs. When that happens, that's the question, because tariffs are often inflationary. And if inflation goes up because of tariffs, will we pull back our dollars and clutch our purse strings a little tighter, as people often do? And then does that therefore harm businesses who are selling less Do they then have to lay people off? And that's how you get to a recession. So I think that's the concern going forward. But the idea that we know everything right now is false. We don't really know that's the problem. We don't know what's ahead, whether with tariffs or with our, inflationary concerns. And that's why the stock market is uniquely going down, where everything else is just in this sort of purgatory of we don't really know where we go from here.
Okay, I want to talk about Apple for a minute. Several things happen with Apple. Obviously, the plane full of iPhones, but they may have the most worrisome impact from the tariffs because they're sold in volume all over the world. And the BBC just did a thing, I think, yesterday. They quoted a guy who follows the market, and his notion is that you almost can't do differential pricing of something like an iPhone around the world. That the tide is going to raise those boats everywhere. And that is interesting because if it goes up 10%, 20% on us, okay, that's nettlesome, that's bothersome. If it goes up 10 or 20% in Malawi or Tanzania, that's going to basically kill the market for iPhones in those countries, because that's a very painful jump. How does Apple deal with that? I mean, do they actually do variable pricing? Then you'll have smuggling. What do you do if you're Apple? If you're Tim Cook?
I think you wonder why you gave so much support to Donald Trump because, they gave a big donation. Tim Cook talked about how he was going to bring all this money to America, and the gift he got in return was $700 to $800 billion in stock market value wiped out in a week because of these tariffs that hit Apple in two different ways. They make it much more expensive if there's a big tariff on China, and there was before the pause a big tariff also on Vietnam, where the phones are made. And as we've already seen, people are starting to realize these phones are going to cost more and are thinking either I buy it now or I just put it off and maybe I don't buy this version. And obviously that hits Apple too. So Apple is sort of the poster child for how tariffs can hurt a company, even when put on by your own country. And Tim Cook has got to be just steaming in that executive suite because of what the White House is doing. That's the only thing I can figure out.
Yeah. Now, I would argue that when I wrote the book about Apple, I discovered the original sin, which was Steve Jobs ripping off Steve Wozniak. And as a result, Wozniak couldn't buy the right chip for the Apple I and Apple II. I think there's a new original sin of the Cook era, and that is down there in China, in a slave labor territory, looking the other way while your own employees down there are not being treated that well either. And then refusing when everybody else is leaving China because of all the problems and everything else. He kind of doubled down there for a while, then quietly began to move stuff out to India. But it seems to me that, dealing with the devil like that has its costs. And he may be paying him right now.
Right. I mean, but a lot of companies make a lot of stuff overseas, and they're all faced with higher prices. Do they eat the costs? Do they pass it on to the consumers? And if so, do the consumers back off? It's a big question.
Yeah. And I'm not sure that the iPhone I think it's almost impervious to price challenges. I mean, it's not like, certain things you give up or you buy a lesser alternative because it's getting a little too expensive. If you're going to buy an Apple iPhone, you're willing to pay more. And if you're not willing to pay more, you do, which you buy the previous model and keep along information behind the cutting edge device.
I don't know if that's true. We haven't had a big spike in prices in iPhones. And so we don't really know if people will still buy the newest thing every year, given a big price hike. We just don't know. And that is a big thorn in Apple's side, that uncertainty going forward. And again, what happens when a company faces uncertainty? Its stock price drops.
Okay, so have you been following? I'm sure you followed this week the new iPhone platform. Uh, the well, there's a new operating system, right? An upgrade. Okay, and it's gotten good reviews. I mean, for all the additional features on it and all of that, except there's apparently one rotten apple in the midst of all that, and the one you would expect least, Siri. I guess there's been internal turmoil for a couple of years on the Siri project, and the one that just came out is buggy, and they have a term for it. It's fairly devastating. I can't find it right now, but they're essentially playing off the name and saying not serious because it doesn't really work well. Why is Apple doing so badly with AI?
I mean, it's not an AI company. And I think its strength was to let all the other companies sort of fight it out for what's the best AI and then take that and put it on the iPhone. Apple's mistake, I guess, if you could say that they're making one, is that they insisted on ownership of this AI, Apple Intelligence, Siri is going to be AI, and they're just not good at it. And so consequently, when my friends who have iPhone 16 and they ask Siri something often, and I mean often, get asked by Siri, hey, would you like OpenAI to handle this one? And they say yes. And so Apple is literally verbally admitting, we can't do this. Let's get OpenAI to do it, which in a way makes sense. I don't know why Apple isn't just buying an AI company. And
I was going to say Apple is richer than most of the countries in the world. Why doesn't it just go out and buy an AI company and embed it?
It seems to be sticking with Siri, which was proven to be, less than major league as soon as we heard what OpenAI was doing and its voice and all that stuff with the search. So I don't know why it's sticking with Siri, but that seems to be the point where Apple comes up short in an otherwise red hot AI market.
Apparently, some of it has to do with the relaxed culture in that group. Their AI ML group has now been nicknamed AIMLESS, aimless, because they just can't seem to get anything done. Will this hurt the company at all? It's got to hurt it a little bit. If the AI is getting more and more embedded into our lives, and it's becoming second nature. It's just intuitive now. If Apple can't produce an equivalent product, that's going to make the iPhone look less capable.
Right. Samsung has installed it in their stuff. Google obviously is putting AI front and center. Apple, you can download the OpenAI app or the Claude, whatever you want. But the idea of talking to your phone and having it talk back with strong, somewhat reliable AI is an attractive thing, and Apple just isn't doing that yet. So that does hurt the company going forward because everybody is just so obsessed with AI right now.
Yeah. Okay, one last thing, and that is in good news for Apple, I think. 2026, they're going to launch their foldable iPhone and iPad, which is kind of cool. I mean, don't you think? I mean, I know foldable is a gimmick, but in theory, as these screens get smaller, the idea that you can double the size without any kind of intervening divider or hinge or something like that has got to be appealing, especially to gimmicky-ridden early adopters of Apple products.
I don't know. I haven't seen many. I know there are other ones that are foldable. I haven't seen many of them out in the wild because they cost more and they seem gimmicky. So I don't know that that's really caught on. But again, Apple often makes consumer products catch on. Right. So if they're going to do this, you'd hope they do it well, but it does feel like a gimmick.
And you're right. Now that you mention it, Samsung introduced their foldable one, 2 years ago?
Mhm.
I have never seen one. I have never seen one in nature. So,
I've seen a few, but a very small number, given that literally everybody has a smartphone.
yeah. Okay. Well, hang on to your hat. And next week's going to probably be just as insane as this week. Good luck to all you at home, especially if you're holding shares in anything, frankly. Uh, I say be patient, but I'm not sure if the long term is any better or worse than what we're going through right now. So just good luck. That's it for now, folks. You can find us on Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. You can see Scott on Facebook and X. And of course, I used to say almost every weeknight, but right now, every weeknight on the NBC Bay Area. And hear me regularly on the BBC radio show Business Matters. I'm talking to them in 2 weeks. We have a lot to talk about. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.